Book of Heaven Volume 3, Call of the Creature to the Order, the Place and the Purpose for which he was created by God, by the servant of God Luisa Piccarreta, little daughter of the Divine Will. Page 1-6. November 1, 1899. Purification of the Church. Her support, the victim souls. As I was in my usual state, I found myself outside of myself, inside a church, in which there was a priest celebrating the divine sacrifice, and while doing this, he was crying bitterly and said, "The pillar of my church has no place to lean." In the act in which he was saying this, I saw a pillar. Its top touched the heavens, and at the bottom of this pillar there were priests, bishops, cardinals and all other dignities, sustaining this pillar. But to my surprise, I went about looking and I saw that of these people, some were very weak, some half-rotten, some infirm, some full of mud. So very scarce was the number of those who were in a condition to sustain it. So, this poor pillar kept swaying, unable to remain still, so many were the quakes it received from the bottom. At the top of this pillar there was the Holy Father who, with gold chains and with rays emanating from his whole person, did as much as he could to sustain it, and to chain and illuminate the people who dwelt at the bottom, although some of them would flee so as to be more comfortable in becoming rotten and covered with mud. And not only this, but he did as much as he could to bind it and to illuminate the whole world. While I was seeing this, that priest who was celebrating Mass, I am not sure whether he was a priest or our Lord, it seems to me it was him, but I cannot tell with certainty, called me close to himself and told me, "My daughter, see in what a heartrending state my church is. The very ones who were supposed to sustain her withdraw, and with their works they knock her down, they beat her, and reach the point of denigrating her. The only remedy is that I cause so much blood to be shed as to form a bath to wash away that rotten mud and to heal their deep wounds, so that, healed, strengthened and embellished in that blood, they may become instruments capable of keeping her stable and firm." Then he added, "I have called you to tell you, do you want to be victim, and therefore be like a prop to sustain this pillar in these times so incorrigible?" At first I felt a shiver run through me for fear that I might not have the strength, but then immediately I offered myself and I pronounced the fiat. At that moment, I found myself surrounded by many saints, angels and purging souls, who tormented me with scourges and other instruments. At first I felt a certain fear, but then, the more I suffered, the more I wanted to suffer, and I enjoyed the suffering like a most sweet nectar, more so, since a thought touched me, who knows whether those pains might be the means to consume my life, so that I might take wing in the last flight toward my highest and only good? But to my highest sorrow, after suffering bitter pains, I saw that those pains would not consume my life. O God, what pain, that this fragile flesh prevents me from uniting myself to my eternal good. After this, I saw the bloody slaughter that was made of the people who were at the bottom of the pillar. What a horrible catastrophe! So very scarce was the number of those who would not be victims, they reached such daringness as to try to kill the Holy Father. But then, it seemed to me that that blood which was shed and those bloody tormented victims were the means to render those who remained strong, so as to sustain the pillar without letting it sway any more. Oh, what happy days! After this, days of triumphs and of peace would arise, the face of the earth seemed to be renewed, and the pillar would acquire its original prestige and splendor. Oh, happy days, I hail you from afar, days which will give great glory to my church, and great honor to the God who is her head. November 3, 1899. Amusement of Jesus with Luisa. This morning my lovable Jesus came and transported me outside of myself, inside a church, then he disappeared and I was left alone. Now, finding myself in the presence of the Most Holy Sacrament, I did my usual adoration, but while I was doing this, I seemed to have become all eyes to see whether I could catch sight of sweet Jesus. At that moment, I saw him on the altar, as a child, calling me with his gracious little hand. Who can say my contentment? I flew to him, and without thinking of anything else, I clasped him in my arms and I kissed him. But in the act in which I was doing this, he assumed a serious appearance, showing that he did not like my kisses, and he began to reject me. Heedless of this, I continued and I said to him, "My pretty little one, beautiful one, the other day you wanted to pour yourself out with me. With kisses and with hugs, and I gave you all the freedom. Today I too want to pour myself out with you, oh please. Give me the freedom to do it." But he continued to reject me, and in seeing that I would not stop, he disappeared. Who can say how mortified and concerned I was left as I found myself inside myself? However, after a little while he came back, and as I wanted to ask him for forgiveness for my impertinences, he forgave me by wanting to pour himself out with me, and while kissing me, he told me, "Beloved of my heart, my divinity resides in you habitually, and just as you keep inventing new things to make me delight with you, so I, to give you tit for tat, use new ways to make you delight with me." With this I understood that it had been a joke that Jesus wanted to make. November 4, 1899. Different effects of the presence of Jesus and of that of the devil. Since this morning blessed Jesus was not coming, the devil was trying to assume his shape and to make himself seen, but since I did not perceive the usual effects, I began to doubt and I signed myself with cross, first myself, and then him, and the devil, in seeing himself signed, was trembling. Immediately I rejected him without even looking at him. After a little while my dear Jesus came, and fearing that it might be the evil spirit once again, I tried to reject him, invoking the help of Jesus and of the Queen Mama. But to assure me that it was not the devil, he told me, "My daughter, in order to be assured of whether it is I or not, your attention must be on the interior effects, whether they move toward virtue or toward vice. In fact, since my nature is virtue, I make my children heirs of nothing else but virtue. You can also comprehend this from the human nature, which is made of flesh. If it happens to develop some wounds, the flesh becomes rotten, and one can say that it is no longer flesh. In the same way, if my nature could retain even the slightest shadow of vice within itself, it would cease to be the God that it is, which can never happen." November 6, 1899. Purity of intention. This morning, as adorable Jesus came and transported me outside of myself, he showed me streets full of human flesh. What a ruthless slaughter! It is horrifying to think about it. Then he showed me how something was happening in the air and many would die suddenly. I have also seen this since the month of March. I began to pray him according to my usual way, that he would placate himself and spare his very images torments so cruel, wars so bloody, and since he had the crown of thorns, I removed it from his head to place it on mine, and this, in order to placate him more. But to my highest sorrow I saw that almost all the thorns would remain broken inside his most holy head, and so very little was left for me to suffer. Jesus appeared serious, almost without paying attention to me. He transported me again into my bed, and since I had my arms on the cross, suffering the pains of the crucifixion which he himself had shared with me before, he took my arms and united them together, binding them with a little rope of gold. Not paying attention to what this might mean, in order to break that severe air that he had, I said to him, "My most sweet love, I offer you these movements of my body that you yourself made me do, as well as all the others which I myself can do, for the sole purpose of pleasing you and glorifying you. Ah, yes. I wish that the movements of my eyelids, of my eyes, of my lips and of all of myself, were also made for the sole purpose of pleasing you alone. Let it be, good Jesus, that all my bones and my nerves may resound among themselves, and with clear voices, may prove my love to you. And he said to me, everything that is done for the sole purpose of pleasing me shines before me in such a way as to draw my divine gazes, and I like it so much, that to those actions, be they even a batting of eyelashes, I give the value as if they were done by me. On the other hand, those other actions, good in themselves and even great, but which are not done for me alone, are like gold that is muddy and full of rust, which does not shine, and I do not so much as look at them. And Lord, how easy it is for our actions to be dirtied with dust. And one should not care about dust, because it can be shaken off, but what one must care about is the intention. Now, while we were saying this, Jesus was busy binding my arms. I said to him, "Oh please, Lord, what are you doing?" And I'm doing this because when you are in that position of crucifixion, you come to placate me, and since I want to chastise the people, I am binding them." Having said this, he disappeared. November 10, 1899. Obedience to the confessor. After going through quite a few days of differences with Jesus, I, wanting to be released, and he, not wanting it, now he would make himself seen sleeping, now he would impose silence on me. Finally, this morning, as I saw him, I also saw the confessor who commanded me absolutely to have Jesus release me, and this, more than once, but Jesus would not listen. However, forced by obedience, I said to him, "My lovable Jesus, when have you ever opposed obedience? I'm not the one who wants to be released, it is the confessor that wants you to make me suffer the crucifixion. Therefore, surrender to this virtue so favored by you, which bejewels your whole life, and which formed the last link by connecting everything into one, the sacrifice of the cross. And Jesus, you really want to use violence on me, touching that link which connected divinity and humanity, and formed one single link, which is obedience." And while saying this, he assumed the appearance of the crucified, and almost forced by the priestly authority, he shared with me the pains of the crucifixion. May the Lord be always blessed, and may everything be for his glory. So it seems I was released.